Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Tim Creasey, welcome to the conversation today.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're actually joining us from Chicago today, where you're keynoting at a conference, but you're based out of Boise, Idaho. Today, I'm joining you from south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today, we're going to be talking about focusing on the people side of change. You're actually keynoting at a change conference. And so I'm probably going to be picking your brain a little bit about related topics to what you're going to be talking about there. But the people side is really, really important. I think we often talk and focus in on systems, which is important. We often think about various models of change and theories of change, all of which are super important. But we always have to think about how does this impact the actual human beings that are in the organization who are going to be impacted by whatever change we're trying to bring about. So this is really what we're going to be exploring and unpacking together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Tim's bio with everybody. Tim Creasey is a dynamic speaker, presenter, researcher, and thought leader on managing the people side of change. His work forms the foundation of the largest body of knowledge in the world on change management. Through public speaking and writing, he advances the discipline of change management as a structured, rigorous approach for driving business results. Tim has spoken to hundreds of thousands of people around the globe, enabling audiences with valuable data and actionable insights. He can solve a Rubik's Cube in 190 seconds. He is obsessed with a band called the Abbott Brothers, and his passion is helping people unlock the challenges of change. I love all of that, and I'm amazed by the Rubik's Cube. You still have a bit to go before you hit that world record. I'm sure you've seen videos where they do it in 5 seconds, but 90 seconds is pretty impressive too.
Yeah, I'm nothing like those kids that can put together all the algorithms they need to do in order in their head. I learned the algorithms, rinse and repeat. My youngest son can do it in 76 seconds now, so he's actually beaten me. Young fingers, more agile, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again for joining me. Anything you would like to add by way of your background, personal context before we dive on into the broader topic?
No, my role is Chief Innovation Officer at a company called PHRi. I've been there for 23 years now. And what's fun is over that whole time, our purpose has really been to understand and then help people overcome the barriers that stand between them and more successful change. And the people side of change is one of the biggest one of those barriers that organizations and projects and initiatives run into. But it feels good when people say, I took your 3-day program and it changed my life because I could support and engage people in a whole different way. So yeah, that's kind of where I come from. Most recently, I spend almost all my time in AI, but the people side, I think, is always going to be the most important side of the business.
Yeah, and even we can talk more about the impact of AI on change later, but all the conversations around AI are inherently a people-oriented conversation. I know that may sound odd to people, but I truly believe that all these conversations around ethical and responsible use of AI center on people. And so we can talk more about that later too.
Well,
and for anyone who's listening or watching who isn't aware, PHRi is a wonderful organization, really the leader on change management. And so if you need to dig into any of these topics deeper, that would be the first place I would recommend to anybody to go to find the research, the models, all of the different tools that can really be helpful.
Well, appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and I think you're right. The people side dimension is whether we're talking about fear or an uncertainty around AI, the mindset required to engage AI in a different way, that knowledgeability gap of unlearning, speaking in keywords. It's all the people side of change.
Yeah. So let's dig in there. Why is tending to that people side of change so important? I mean, maybe it's just completely obvious to everybody, but let's articulate and parse it out? Like, why is that so important as we're engaging in these huge I mean, sometimes it's huge, massive. I guess other times it's smaller change, but regardless, it's hard. So why is the people side so important?
Well, and I think what's interesting is coming out of the last 4 years, you can't really unsee the people side of the organization with this
Yeah.
whole remote work experiment we did. So I feel like there's this kind of this renaissance of, oh, the people side. For 25 years, right, we've been doing research and development around really talking about change as kind of like a coin with two sides. Like every change we try to implement in the organization, there's a technical side where we design, develop, deliver the technical solution, the nuts and the bolts of what it is we're going to try to fix. And we've been doing that all for a very long time on all kinds of, and I say technical side, it doesn't have to be technological, right?
Right, right.
We're doing a lot of work inside of ProSci around six new values that we rolled out in 2021. Like those 6 values was a technical part of the change. Adding individual behaviors through a crowdsourced effort right now, that's the technical side of the change, even though it doesn't have technology involved. The other side of the change coin is the people side, though. And that's where we have to help our people engage, adopt, and use the change effectively, bring it to life in the way they show up each and every day. And all kinds of organizational trends and things that have changed over the last 20 years have really elevated the importance of kind of that people side of the change coin. But I like talking about it as 2 sides of a coin because, for one, it's always been there.
Yeah.
Even when we thought we didn't have to pay attention to it because maybe value systems didn't, and it's always been there and it's always going to be there. And it's part of the same. Right, John, I've been asked, one of the questions I've been asked for the longest time at my time at ProSci is, what's the ROI of change management? As if it's something like separate than the ROI of the change we're trying to deliver. And so I started to show you, it's not 2 circles, it's the initiative's ROI and what portion of that depends on people changing how they do their jobs. That's the ROI of change management. It's capturing the people dependent portion of the changes that we do. And I just think it's becoming more and more apparent that ignoring it isn't working.
Yeah. So what happens when we ignore it or when we don't give? I'm not sure many leaders are like trying to ignore it. I think
Yeah.
most people think, yeah, this is important. We need to remember the people side. But I think in practice, it often gets ignored or it just gets under resourced. And so we end up focusing so much on the processes, the systems, the policies, the technical integrations, whatever the thing may be. We end up just focusing so much on that. And then we'll have like an all hands meeting to talk about it and then send an email. And then we think we're good on the people side. So like what happens when we just fail to really invest in that people side?
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite jokes, I deliver this on stage all the time. It's is an email on Monday for training on Tuesday for go live on Wednesday is not the way to prepare, equip, and support your people to get the outcomes you want, right? I was delivering it one time. This was September 2015. It was a Gartner conference. I was in DC. I was on point that day, John. You know how when you're on the stage, you're really on point. So I have it pop up on the screen. It was a build email on Monday for training on Tuesday for go live on Wednesday. I've got 300 people in the crowd laughing, and this woman up front raises her hand. And I'm like, pretty bold move in a room this big when I'm on point. And I'm like, what? Yeah, tell us your experience. And I call it, bring her into the conversation. She goes, at my company, we send an email on Monday for training on Tuesday for the system we pushed live last Thursday. I'm thinking, oh no, right? But that's telling people about the change is not tending to the people side of change. Training people only is not tending to the people side of change. And so I start to use this. I've been really playing with juxtaposition. I think when human beings try to make sense of something, if we can give them context and contrast, it helps them really make sense. So context, how does this idea come to life in what you already know? Contrast, how can I show you 2 things that are alike or different? So I've been using these phrases, John, leaving change to chance or taking charge of change, right? By decree, because we told you, because we trained you, that's leaving change to chance. That's
Yeah.
not putting in the effort to prepare, equip, and support your people for the journey you're asking them to take. and I started to, a long time ago, I built this laundry list of all these costs and consequences when we leave the people side of change to chance. Like, what are we really exposing ourselves to? One of my favorites was this, you know what the two most costly letters in change are?
What's
R,
that?
R and E.
R and E.
Retrain, rescope, redesign, revisit, retreat, right? All of the rework we do when we bring the people side of change too late to the table. So that's one of the big things that happens when we just don't tend to it with the attention we needed to, or don't bring it to the table early enough, is that leaving change to chance. So all those re's, and then I had this big laundry list. I started turning it into the ABCs of leaving change to chance, right? Anger, budget balloons, confusion, despair. But then there's also ABCs when we jump in front and take charge of change, right? Alignment, belonging, collaboration, desire. So to me, that's the difference, John. Are we going to roll the dice? Calvin Coolidge once said, "Those who leave to chance must abide by the results of chance." But if we know adoption and usage is critical for the change outcomes, can we put the effort, energy, intent into to making it work?
Yeah, yeah, and it really just takes intentionality and consistent effort, and really what amounts to probably over communication in the minds of a lot of people. That's one of the things I see all the time is people think they've communicated something, they think that they're focusing on the human side, and it's that one email. It's the joke you made at your conference, and maybe they've done more than that, but it almost never is enough. You need to over communicate. You need to hit it multiple times. And one of the challenges I think about, with all of this is when you have the C-suite or senior executives sitting around a table talking about these change initiatives, sometimes they forget that they're in a lot of meetings where these things are discussed over and over and over again. And then they just kind of think that that's where everyone else is at too,
Yep.
that everyone else is on the same page or understands the nuances or understands everything that's involved with it, even though for that random line worker, they've only heard it one time in an email, or maybe it came up in one meeting once. And so just because I may feel like I'm thoroughly informed as a middle manager or senior leader even, doesn't mean that people on my team are or the line workers are. So you just got to really be disciplined about consistently, repetitively beating that drum over and over, and really communicating and over communicating the messages you're trying to get across, if there's any hope of that change initiative really being successful, having legs, creating the buy-in, and then being like sustainable over time.
100%. And I've often talked about the role of the change agent as the time traveler. To kind of riff on this a little bit, right? So we talk about change, lots of models that use 3 phases of change. At ProSci, we use current, transition, and future. And we realize that there's so much change going on in the organization. There's no singular current state, right? But for this body of work, here's the way it used to be done. Here's the move we're going to make, and here's how we're going to do things in a new way. Current, transition, future. Which of those 3 states do your senior leaders and executives live in?
The current state.
I would say our executives live in the future state. That's where we
Well,
pay them
I
to
hope they
live.
do.
And like, think about this change, like you said, right? They started thinking about this change a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Right. They started percolating, putting the connections together. This change that goes live tomorrow, they started thinking about it a year and a half ago. So they're living like in the future now. The project team, they live in the transition state. For the last year, they've been trying to figure out and build the technical and now the whole rest of the organization that's about to find out about it, they're in today, current state. They're finding about it right now. And so the change practitioner, the change agents in an organization have a time traveling role of helping those senior leaders remember, like you said, you've been in a lot of meetings, you heard about this a long time, and you've been thinking about it for a year and a half. Everybody else is about to find out about it today. And so we have to bring those senior leaders back into speaking in the current state, bring that project team back into grounding in the current state to help our people step out of the way they do things today, step through that transition that everybody else, you all made already, so that they can successfully get to that future state too.
Yeah, no, the way you're describing that makes perfect sense. And I hope that leaders are always in that future state and being strategic. And it's interesting, like this weird tension that I see in my work with a lot of senior executives is absolutely there should be this long-term foresight and strategic thinking and preparation. But unfortunately, so many leaders get caught up. They don't do that enough. And so then they get caught up in the day-to-day grind and putting out fires. And so that was why I initially said, because so many leaders are just
Yeah.
caught up in like the immediacy of like whatever the current urgent thing is without taking the time to move into the future. But you're absolutely right. That's the way it should work. And when it does work that way, and we have a leader who is really intentional about reframing, resetting their mind so that they can get back and meet their team where they're at, which, like you said, their team is probably fairly oblivious. They don't know what's coming. And so it's really hard for a leader to, like you say, to do that time travel and to like turn back the dials to remember what was it like when I first had to process this information? What was it like when I first learned about this major disruption that's going to change the way, a whole bunch of people do their jobs? There's probably some level of anxiety there, right? There's probably some level of just, certainly discomfort, anxiety, you're probably the walls of resistance are going up. Even for a senior leader, those are the types of emotions that often happen because it's going to be hard. And so you just have to, like, whether you want to frame it as compassion or empathy or whatever, have the emotional intelligence to meet your people where they're at and to understand they are going to be dealing with all those same things that maybe you've had a year to process through and kind of get over and build through, and now you're in a good spot. You're going to have to help your people through that process as well. And hopefully, if you've laid out a really great, if you have a nice runway with a really great process and you have a change that's really going to be positive and impactful, you can generate that buy-in a lot faster than perhaps it took the leadership team to develop the whole strategy overall. But it's still going to take time and effort, and it's not a one-off. You can't just decide today I'm going to explain this and just expect people to get in line, fall in line, and just do what I say. That's a recipe for disaster. And that's why, so many change initiatives often don't hit the results that were originally intended, right?
Absolutely. We, find 25 years of research, we find that active and visible participation by the senior leader throughout the initiative is the top contributor to successful change. And it's not just showing up at the kickoff, disappearing and
Right.
showing back up at the pizza party. The sponsor's role goes well beyond the ink in the pen for signing checks and signing charters, right? The PHRi research has identified what we call the ABCs of sponsorship: active and visible participation. That's the A, active and visible participation throughout. B is building coalitions of support. So it's not
Mm.
enough for you, senior leader, to be on board. Here's the other 4 pivotal leaders I need you to make sure that you've built into this coalition. And then the C is communicate directly with employees. And that's where I think, as change practitioners, one of our very first instructors, Dr. J.J. Johnson, rest in peace. He was a senior executive AT&T before he joined PHRi, well before he joined PHRi. And he said, Tim, you know which teams got the best sponsorship out of me? And I said, which ones? Which ones? I'm expecting some crazy pearl of wisdom. And he said, the teams that told me exactly what they needed me to do. Right? When the team did the legwork of, here are the key bullet points, here is where this group is, here is what their pulse and the other things going on for them are. We have a sponsor engagement session we do with senior leaders. We had an activity where we would put the senior leader we do a role play and say, pretend you're telling me about the change. I am this role in the organization. You have 5 minutes to talk about why the change is happening. Now, pretend I'm this different role in the organization. Explain to me why the change is happening. Now I'm this different role. Just putting him into 3 different situations to explain why the change is happening to that unique role, it helps to kind of reorient that notion that effective communication is not what you say, it's what gets heard. which means it's going to
Mm.
pass through all kinds of filters and understandings of what's important to that person or that group. And the change practitioners there is to
Yeah.
help those senior leaders really step into that role of being a great sponsor of change.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. All right, let's pivot in the final few minutes we have together. And I want to talk more about the role of AI in change. We referred to it, towards the beginning in brief, but I know this is an area of great expertise for you. So, what do you see, coming down the pike in terms of how AI is impacting change management, generally speaking, and how can we kind of match this with the human side, the people side that we've been discussing?
Yeah, great question. And so ProSci did a chunk of research about AI and change management, the impact. We did a webinar then where we rolled that research out, had a couple thousand people. And we leaned into that group to say, what is this? In terms of a practitioner, is your level of focus on using AI to do your change work better, helping your organization figure out its AI strategy, or supporting the readiness and adoption of an AI deployment in an organization? So
Mm-hmm.
suppose your organization's rolling out Copilot, you're there to do the people side work of an AI deployment. Only 12% were in that bottom group of doing the people side readiness and adoption enablement of an AI deployment. About a fifth were helping their organizations make sense of that AI strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Given our organization, given our industry, given our value stream, our suppliers, our competitors, how we work with data, what's our path forward? Only about a fifth of them were doing that. 2/3 were really looking at how do I, as a practitioner, do my work better by leaning on this new tool that we have available for us. So I think that's kind of the lay of the land. We see, in terms of how practitioners are using it, the top two uses were communication support and content creation. So really supporting, and it kind of makes sense that we go right to the communication components. Strategy and planning was next, followed by automation and efficiency, and data analysis. So those are the 5 big use cases that we've seen come out of the research. We're starting to build out prompt libraries and activities below those. But I think the frame that I would offer up to folks as they start to think about this AI journey, I kind of think about 3 buckets of work. There's a bucket of work I have to do on my own, human-centric, and I think about a week of my work, right? A chunk
Mm-hmm.
of that I got to do on my own. A chunk of that work I may be able to fully automate with generative AI as those solutions
Yeah.
start to come forward. But the middle chunk of work is work I can start to do with AI. If I can start to take AI as an intern that I can collaborate with, given its unique power and expertise and command of the human language, and if I can learn how to give it good instructions based on what I want to get out of it, I all of a sudden have, and John, one of my favorite phrases is first drafts in a flash. First
Mm-hmm.
drafts in
Mm-hmm.
a flash. So you now circle this back to the people side of change. I got a tool. I can't tell you about the tool just yet, but had somebody call me up and tell me about using it. And they said, oh my gosh, Tim, right? It was going to take me 2 hours to create this draft document. It took me about a half an hour. I now have 90 minutes to go do real people side work,
Mm-hmm.
connecting work, engaging work, involving work, coaching a sponsor work. I had somebody that said, hey, I was building out a half-day agenda to try to bring ADCAR to a particular audience. Instead of taking me 2 hours, it took me 15 minutes to get that first draft that we could start to refine on. I had an hour and 45 minutes to go do real people side work. So to me, there's this interesting, people talk about time savings, but like time
Mm-hmm.
freedom in terms of how we get to architect the work we do going forward, I think is a fascinating frontier. So
The time freedom framing, I think, is wonderful. I was speaking at an HR tech summit yesterday, actually in Salt Lake City, and someone asked me the question about, because we were talking about AI and HR, and someone asked the question about, well, like what about like all the interns? Like what kind of entry level work or internship work is there going to be, and how are we going to help people get into the field and like start to get experience? Which was an interesting question. There's a lot to unpack there and a lot to discuss. But my initial, thought and part of my response was along the lines of, you know, it sounds like AI can do a lot of what we used to have interns do. So why don't we leverage it as a tool in that way? Now we still have to think about how we have the pipeline of talent coming into the field, right? And that's a really important topic in and of itself. But I like how you just framed AI as your intern, just like an intern, if you're trying to coach them and mentor them and train them to produce and contribute in meaningful ways, it takes direction. It takes time to be able to help them understand what they need to be doing. The same thing with generative AI models. Like I mean, you can't usually just throw in a generic prompt and get anything good. You have to really refine it, and you have to give really precise instructions, just like you would for an intern. And so I like thinking about AI that way as a digital intern who can really help you to do a lot of that grunt work, the quick drafts, the things that have to be done that you can then flesh out, refine, iterate on to produce something that's really high quality. I think that's a really great way to think about it. And the time freedom, like you mentioned, super, super important. It's not just about efficiency, productivity, and getting more done in a workday. It's reallocating our time, because now so much of that stuff that can be automated is automated. We still need to be doing the people stuff. We need to be building those relationships, building those coalitions. All of that takes time. All that takes an incredible amount of effort. And so if it can free you up to do more of that, that is fantastic. And why wouldn't we leverage a tool to be able to allow us to do that?
100%. And I don't, I'd go so far as to say it's not that we need to do that stuff. We actually get to do that stuff now
Yeah.
because we have the time. And I don't know any change practitioners that are sitting around with a bunch of intern capacity looking to find work to put it against, right? The
Right.
folks I know in the change space are tapped out trying to
Right.
figure out how to have impact with the limited hours and calories, that they have. So this whole AI as an intern, I realize I have an article about it on my LinkedIn page if people want to go read about it right now, kind of right now. I have a manuscript I just penned over the last 2 weeks called How to Unlock Your Human Potential by Taking on an AI Intern. And it gets into all that nuts and bolts, but it's that mindset of the other thing that's interesting, John, right? People say, I don't know what to ask. I don't know what to ask. I don't know what to ask it. And it's like, that's because you're thinking about it like an oracle, not an intern. You're thinking about it like an oracle that you can go just ask a question. Like, that's not what it is. It's an intern you get to give instructions to. You get to give instructions what the output looks like, who it's for, give it instructions about source material and what you want to elevate, damper down.
Yeah.
And it's like an intern that you get to do iterations with too. Like, go do a
Yeah.
first draft with me, coming back, and then now let's refine, enhance, expand. So yeah, the article and the book have a whole bunch of these AI intern tasks that this AI intern is really good at, that I think anybody, you can look back over your last week of work and say, when could I have had an amazing intern do a chunk of this work for me? And that's what I think the potential we have to unlock is in front of us. So.
I love it. I love it. I love that framing. I think it's super helpful and easily understandable for anyone who might be hesitant, to try to really dabble with and experiment with various large language models and generative AI. Tim, I know at the time I need to let you go, but before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. Most active on LinkedIn. That's where you'll find me personally. PHRi is where I'm the Chief Innovation Officer. So PHRi.com, YouTube, or LinkedIn as well. I guess my last word is always like, may you always see the challenges of change in front of you as unlockable, so that you can find the keys that I know you already have within. Right?
I love it.
People can overcome the challenges in front of them once we help them see those changes or those challenges as something they can unlock and overcome. And so that's my goal. And John, the AI as an intern frame is kind of an example of that. Is like, how can we provide a frame that makes the challenges of change unlockable and accessible? So I so appreciate the time, and thank you for the flexibility to do this from my hotel room recording studio.
Thank you so much. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Tim and his team at PHRi can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.